Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is rely. Let's take a moment to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you are likely to hear rely used is to mean to depend on someone or something with full trust or confidence. Right? Maybe you've heard someone say something like, I know I can count on this person. I trust or I am confident they're going to do what they say they're going to do. That very much connects to this first definition. A second way, and very much related, that you'll hear rely used is to mean to be dependent on someone or something, right? So here, there might be something you need in order to continue on or carry forward. We'll look at some examples of that in just a few moments. You should know that rely is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to form relying. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed, but we need to make a spelling change. So before I add that suffix of ed, I need to drop the y, change it to an I, and then add ed. Our base verb, rely, I, ends in a vowel sound, and all vowel sounds are voiced. This means that our past tense ending is just going to make a D sound. So I'm not adding an extra syllable as I say it. It should sound like this: relied, relied. Okay? Now, when we use this verb rely, it is most commonly used as a phrasal verb. So you might hear rely on or rely upon. And so we're going to spend a moment talking about those. You're going to see that the meanings I have listed here are very similar to what we just discussed. So let's talk about rely on or rely upon. Again, this means that we could be putting trust in to someone or something, and we're doing it pretty confidently. Let's look at an example sentence. We can rely on her to finish the project by the end of the day. So, if I am saying this statement, I am saying I am confident. I know and I trust that this person is going to complete this by this certain point in time. Now, I could have said we can rely upon her to finish the project. That would have the same meaning. I think it's more likely you'll hear rely on, especially in the Midwest where I live here in the United States. Now, a second way to use rely on is very much connected to that second definition we just talked about moments ago, where we're talking about being dependent on something. Let's take a look at an example of that. Children rely on their parents to meet all their basic needs. Right? Children are dependent on their parents for food, for shelter, for transportation, and many, many other things, right? They depend on their parents. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the present progressive and the present perfect. Let's start with the present progressive. Your teachers or your textbooks that you're using in your English classes might refer to this as the present continuous, and that's fine. Present progressive, present continuous, they mean the same thing. But both of these names are generally describing actions that are happening now or actions that are in progress during a time period that hasn't been completed yet. I like saying present progressive because it helps me and it helps my students remember that I need two parts to make this verb tense. So in the affirmative, I'm going to have my subject, I'm going to have a form of be, so am, is, or are, and then I have that ing form of the verb. So be in the present plus my verb with ing, that is what makes my two parts to the present progressive. Let's look at an example sentence. According to a recent survey, Americans are relying on Dr. Google over their physicians. So, this sentence was borrowed from another article, I think in a magazine, noting that more people are putting their trust and confidence into what they find on Google than what their own doctors might say or the advice their own physicians might give to them. That can be a little scary. But now let's look at a negative present progressive sentence. To do this, again, I start with my subject. I have my form of be that matches. So if my subject is I use am. If my subject is we, they, or you, I use are. And if my subject is he, she, or it, I use is. Okay, so subject, present form of be, then not, then that ing form of the verb. Here's another example. The city isn't relying on trailers to house disaster victims. So here they are not dependent on that particular form of housing. Let's look at making a yes or no question in the present progressive. To do this, I start with a present form of be, whichever form matches my subject, and then that subject comes next. Then I use my ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Are you relying on my help today? Right? Putting your trust, your confidence into this short little lecture on this verb. Now let's move on and talk about the present perfect. We use this verb tense to sometimes describe an action that started in the past and is continuing into the present, but we might also use it to describe an action that occurred at some unknown point in the past. Okay? Sometimes you'll hear this called the indefinite past tense. Again, you'll notice we have two P's in the name of this verb tense. And this is going to help me remember that I need two parts to make my verb. Here in the affirmative, I'm going to have my subject. And if my subject is I, you, we, or they, I'll use have, and then the participle form of the verb. And here, this is a regular verb, so our past tense is the participle form. Or if my subject is he, she, or it, I'm going to use has and then the participle form of the verb. Let's look at an example sentence. We have relied on certain marketing strategies for years, but they might not work with younger generations. Okay, so perhaps we've got some kind of leader within an organization, right, saying we've been dependent on these certain strategies, but younger consumers behave differently. They're motivated differently. So perhaps we can't be dependent on those same strategies going forward. Now let's take a look at a negative present perfect sentence. Again, I'm going to have my subject. I'll use have or has, then not, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's another example. He hasn't relied on his parents since graduating from college. So here, this might be this person is self-sufficient. They have a job. They're able to take care of themselves. Whereas previously, maybe they were asking their parents for money. Now, let's talk about making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, I start with have or has, then I'm going to have my subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's my last example. Have we relied on falsified data to make decisions? Right? This could be a scary question an organization, a group perhaps is asking, right? So, did we put our confidence in something that we really shouldn't have trusted? Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb rely. And the first word we're going to talk about is the noun reliance. Reliance is a noun that's referring to the dependence on or trust we have in either someone or something. An example of this might be last week, the French president said Europe must reduce its reliance on the US dollar. So, again, this would connect back to that idea how much confidence, how much dependence there is in this particular form of currency. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective reliable. This generally means we're talking about something that's consistently good in quality or it consistently performs well. Another way to think of it, we're able to trust this. And a very important question to ask ourselves, is this a reliable source for information? This is really a good question to ask anytime you see something on the internet, right? Kind of where is it coming from? Am I able to trust this organization? Now, let's look at another related word. You'll notice I've added the prefix un. And if you've been in my class before, we talk about this a lot. Anytime we see that prefix, we might want to think not and then look back at our root or base word. So here, we can't or we're not able to rely upon something. We're not able to trust it. An example of this. Do you work with any unreliable people? So this might be a person where you're wondering, like, are they really going to show up today? Are they going to show up on time? Are they going to stay through their entire shift? Right? Those might be some examples of what could make a coworker or colleague unreliable. The last word I'll leave you with today is the noun reliability. This refers to the quality of being trustworthy or the quality of performing very consistently and positively or well, performing consistently well. An example of this might be senators will hear testimony about the reliability of the energy grid and renewable energy sources. So, this sentence, and this is a concern some people have had as we've explored different forms of energy sources, so wind and solar. Like, what if there is no sun? What if there is no wind, right? Is that power source still going to be able to perform, right? So many of those questions have been answered, but it's an example of how you might see the noun reliability used. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.